So thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you listening in, and certainly if you really like it, certainly subscribe and tell your friends and family. Always love to add more audience and hopefully expand their learning and education. And this is what we're about. We're just trying to help expand people's mind and share unique experts and share their journey of where they've gone with their financial lives as well as their lives in general. So today I'm really excited to have Dr. Alan Lomax, who's the CEO and Investor Relations Manager at Stee Talker Capital, a multifamily real estate investment firm committed to enhancing the quality of life for communities and investors. I love that. So, and he's also the host of the Real Estate Investing Abundance podcast, which I would highly encourage you to go listen. Great guests, great information to expand your education around real estate and real estate investing. So, Alan, thanks for joining me today.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be with you and good to reconnect with you. You were on my podcast not too long ago, and I had an enjoyable time meeting and greeting with you at that point in time, and you had a whole lot of wisdom to share with us, and I appreciate you being on my show.
All right, wonderful. So now we get to turn it and learn more about you and kind of your journey into real estate investing. We'll get into that for sure. But you didn't start that way. So let's maybe backtrack a little bit and share kind of your history and education and how it sort of made your way into real estate investing. So if you can share that, it'd be great.
Well, I was a ne'er-do-well for the first part of my adult life, way too much of my adult life. I was kind of the same way as a child. I have dyslexia, and I was labeled as a slow learner and was put in slow learner classes and going into high school. Of course, didn't do very well on achievement test, and a well-meaning high school counselor suggested that I go into a trade rather than into a university education. Went ahead and went into university and had a lackluster undergraduate career and went on into the workforce and went from dead-end job to dead-end job to dead-end job. And finally, I had a major wake-up call when I was 38 years old. And due to that, I went into therapy, and Jane, my therapist at that time, found in me things that I couldn't see in myself, and found that I had strengths and that I had possibilities. And really, that was the first time in my life when I really accepted the fact that I could make a difference in the world. And with that, I went back to graduate school and got my degree in counseling, and eventually I got my PhD in organizational systems psychology. And you know, Angela Duckworth wrote the book Grit, and she has, which her book was really emphasizing grit, which was one thing I didn't have, but she has later come to the realization that there has to be a marriage of passion and persistence. And I was certainly lacking both of those things until my late 30s. And I found the passion, and with the passion, I found the grit, and my life has never been the same since then. I've found a very satisfying career in higher education and have found tremendous fulfillment there and continue teaching psychology today. And I'm privileged to be able to do that at my age, but it just brings tremendous reward, so I continue doing that. In terms of getting into real estate, it was really, I was an accidental investor long before I became an intentional investor. My first investments, I was living and working at the University of Guam, and I wanted a place to come back to here in the States, and so I found a piece of property in Durango, Colorado, which was my home prior to going to Guam. And so I built a home there with a mother-in-law suite so that I could rent out the primary residence and have the mother-in-law suite to come back to. Well, that was very thrilling because I had someone else paying my mortgage, and I had a free place to come to when I had a chance to come back to the States. I didn't know it at the time. That was the late 1990s. I didn't know it, but that's what they call house hacking today.
Right.
And so I retained that home when I moved back to the States. I was living in coastal South Texas, and I wanted any excuse to get out of there, and so I retained my home in Colorado and utilized it as often as I could. And when I moved here to North Carolina, I continued hacking houses. Still didn't know there was a name for it, but when I moved here to North Carolina, I intentionally purchased a home that was much larger than my needs required, and it was a single-family home, and I hacked it into a triplex. And once again, that was really amazing, having someone else pay my mortgages. So I went out and I purchased a second home here in the area, did the same thing to it, hacked it down into a triplex, and held on to those, and that was great, and that was wonderful until 2008, when the total economy retracted and I lost my university position. And though the properties were cash flowing, they certainly were not cash flowing to the extent that was sufficient enough to provide for my living. So I had some extraordinarily challenging times from really essentially 2008 until 2000, and when I did some reshuffling and I got some funds together and I invested in some spec homes, and that was disastrous. You shouldn't be investing money where you don't know what you're doing. And so I actually lost absolutely everything, and in 2016 had to start all over again.
Wow.
So this time I started off with education and did a lot of reading and studying and following different people at different podcasts, and eventually got into some mastermind groups and started actually partnering with people and individuals, and got my feet back under me, and also found another teaching position where I am currently at now, and so stabilized myself in a whole lot of ways, and came to this point in place where I can now provide other people opportunities to enhance their financial well-being particularly through passive real estate investing. Long story, but that's my life story there.
No, well, there's a lot in there. And let me go back to the start with the house hacking. So, just like maybe some folks maybe not thinking they're going to get into real estate investing, and somehow it just kind of happens. And so what were those sort of early stages as you're kind of figuring that out? What were some of the big lessons learned from just even that initial entryway into real estate investing?
Well, I learned that it is a low risk way to get in it, and that it's a wonderful way to learn about real estate investing if you want to put the time, effort, and energy into it. House hacking is not easy. My dad was a jack of all trades. He was actually a civil engineer, and so just living with him, being around him, I picked up a whole lot of those construction skills, and so that's what I was doing. I was doing the wiring, the plumbing, the sheetrock. I was doing all of that in that first house here in North Carolina. It was an extensive renovation. I even took out the staircase and moved it to another location, and just did everything from the bottom up. It was what they call a rancher with a raised ranch, so it had a full basement in it, but it was a walkout basement, and that's where I put the apartments. So I guess the lessons learned are that if you don't want to partner with people, it's a good way to do it without really risking losing your shirt, because it's your primary residence, you're already making those mortgage payments, and so it's a fairly safe and a secure way to get started. And you're going to learn a lot about renovations, and they always look so much easier when you're looking at them. And then you start tearing out those walls and different things, and you go, oh my God, I can't believe they did this or that or the other. And so you learn a whole lot about why renovations are expensive. And then the other thing you're going to learn is you're going to learn a whole lot about tenant relationships and property management. And I think probably the big risk to people house hacking is becoming friends with your tenants. I was aware of that going into that. So I was always very cordial with my tenants, but I always looked at it as a business. And I treated my tenants as tenants rather than friends and next door neighbors. So I don't know. Those are the lessons learned. Any questions you have on that?
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. So it's just interesting to kind of, because the best learning, I think, and I think this is just typical, right? The experiencing it, right, firsthand. You're kind
Yeah,
of forced to
exactly.
learn these sorts of things. And,
Yeah.
the thing I take away, certainly, even my early stages of real estate investing is, right, to treat it like a business, right? And yes, you can have relationships and be friendly to your tenants, but in reality, you are in a business and you got to treat it that way, from profit and loss and management and insurance and all those things that come along with a business. That real estate investing is a business, right? Especially if you're
Absolutely.
doing it in the way that you described there. So it's really important, as people are thinking about, if you're thinking about getting into it, that you think of it that way. It isn't just renting things out. It is a business. You have to treat it
Absolutely.
that way.
Yes.
And so from there, you mentioned the spec building, which I think that's a massively important lesson too for you as
Yeah.
well, in terms of getting into something that maybe you weren't prepared or know enough about, right? And I get often asked, like, where should I invest? And my usual response is, well, what do you know? What are you passionate about? What do you understand better? I think that focusing on that will probably reduce your risk in what you're investing in, and hopefully lead to higher levels of success. But you got to start there and understand what you're investing in and get the proper education and partnership. Just like you said, Alan, it's so key, right? It's not an individual sport by any stretch.
Yeah.
I mean, it could feel like that some days, but it's certainly, to be successful, having a good team around you is.
Well, absolutely. But yeah, confidence is a wonderful thing to have, and I certainly lack that in the first part of my life. But there is such a thing as hubris, and and that was really my problem with this spec home building. I was overconfident in the fact that I had renovated a couple of houses. I also had done some fix and flips and turned several houses. I during that period of time I also had a mobile home park. So I had done quite a lot of rehab and rehabilitation, and so that's really where the hubris came in. I thought, oh, I know all there is to know about the construction world, and I got my butt whipped considerably because of hubris. Really, I just thought that I really knew more than I did, and I learned a whole lot from that. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
no, and that's great. And that's all part of the journey of it. And I think, to your point, even if you, which I think heard me starting in real estate, I wanted to learn so much before I took a step. And sometimes you kind of have to just move, right? And try some stuff out with information you have, and recognize that it's not everything's probably going to work out, and sort of be comfortable with that and be willing to absorb some of those unfortunate, painful situations, because they can come when we least expect it. And that's just a broader, I think, benefit from going through it, because now you're probably going to be going into things much wiser than before.
Well, I
Um,
certainly hope so, but I don't go into anything these days without counseling with the wisest people in my circles. And I mean, serious counseling with them. And not only am I just relying upon people who have a great deal more wisdom than I do, but I've learned a whole lot about analysis of properties. You were referring to analysis paralysis, but there, which can prevent you from moving forward. But I have learned that the analysis is a critical step before moving forward. It sounds like you learned that much earlier on in life than I did, but it's a critical aspect, and I've gotten much better at it. But I always take my analysis to a higher level to others who have much more experience
yeah,
with the
and I think
analysis.
that's the perfect situation. I think, to back to the team situation and thought, right? We stay in the places that we were strongest or know most about, and hopefully surround ourselves with others that could supplement what we're doing, and we're better as a team. And certainly real estate, I've seen that over the years is so key because there's so many facets around it that are needed to make it as successful, or at least to increase the chance of success. So let me switch gears to how did you get into sort of the multifamily space, right? You're doing the spec building, the house hacking, and these mobile home parks. Like, how did multifamily sort of now enter the game for you?
Well, in 2016, when I lost everything, there was, I just went into a very deep depression. Being a psychologist, I'm not supposed to do that, but I did. And so, of course, during those really, dark and deep times, what else do you do but reflect? And so I did a lot of reflection, and I did a lot of exploration, eventually coming out of the depression enough to actually start really looking at what my next steps were going to be. I was no spring chick, I knew that, but I also knew that, well, while I could die tomorrow, I could also be here another 30, 35 years. And I was terrified of the fact that I would be one of those individuals living on a fixed Social Security income. And I knew that was not the future that I wanted. And so I had to come to a decision of, well, where am I going to go forward from here? And so looking around, I just began to realize that I'm going to have to be part of a team. I'm not going to go out there and try to do everything myself. And I could be part of a team that, of course, was doing single family fix and flips. There are teams that do that. I looked at that and knew the experiences that I had within that. And it's not that I didn't enjoy those. I really enjoy looking at a trashed out home and seeing the possibilities that can be there. And I just really enjoy the finished product of seeing a piece of trash become, essentially a castle in a lot of ways. That's fulfilling in and of itself. But what I looked at was that here I am in my mid-60s, and I don't want to wait 30 years to develop my finances back to where they had previously been. And house hacking is a slow way to get there. So I looked at multifamily, and I'm going, that is the only way to really scale at the rate of speed that I wanted to do so. So that was the decision to go into multifamily and to seek out masterminds and individuals involved in that particular space.
So then, going through that, getting educated. So then how did you make your entryway into it? Like, what was the first deal? Like, how did it all start?
It really started with podcasts. And, everyone says you've got to reach out and build a network. And most people will go, well, go to meetups and go have coffee with people in the industry, and all of those things were like, for me, being the proverbial introvert, I was like, oh, God, there is no way. I did try those things, actually. It's not that I didn't give a try to those things, but they always felt so extraordinarily awkward for me that they just weren't, I just wasn't making any headway with those. And so I thought, well, there's one thing I can do, and I can talk to people on an individual basis, and I can do that, and I can do that well, and I can do that in a comfortable environment. So I said, well, start a podcast. So I did. And so I started on a very regular basis talking with successful people in the industry, and that was extraordinarily fulfilling. And just the fact of having those conversations on, several a week. I was publishing my podcast 3 times a week, so I was having at least 3 conversations with people, successful people in the industry on a very regular basis. And so I was getting a lot of energy from just having those conversations. But also, of course, along that way, my network was developing significantly. And the mastermind I eventually joined were were individuals who had been on my podcast and who I had really that previous relationship with through the podcast. And so have an annual conference, and I went to the conference and go, yeah, I can deal with this. Let's join that mastermind.
That's great. Yeah. And it's so important to get around folks who can connect with and, to your point, just get to know folks and understand their journey along real estate, especially if you're interested in that. Like, but just to be around others and be able to be open and share. And so, and then potentially find ways to partner and work together. So how did it evolve into an actual first investment, like offering?
Well, when I first got into the mastermind, it was like push, 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 get your first deal out there, get to know the realtors. And I'm a realtor myself, so it's really not difficult for me to talk to realtors. So I went out there and did that, and there was a property I put an LOI on. And after I put the LOI out there, I go, God, I hope they don't accept this LOI. And sure enough, they didn't. And so that was a real dawning moment on me that another path for me here. And so from that point on, I started setting up my company to be the capital raiser. And so that's what I have been doing, is just raising capital, and I am on the GP side of the deal via the aspect that I'm the one bringing the capital to the deals that I'm in. And that's worked out wonderful.
That's cool. So let me make sure I understand. So then through your mastermind, you've developed a relationship with the operators who are actually finding the properties and, putting together the renovation plans and sort of the investment offering. So you've partnered with different operators who do that, and then you're now focused primarily on helping them raise capital.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
That's correct. And it's not just those within the mastermind that I partner with. I've got an extensive network through the podcast. I've interviewed approximately 650 different individuals and operators. So I've got an extensive network, and so I do extensive screening before partnering with anyone in terms of actually raising the capital for them, because I do not want to bring investors into a syndication that hasn't had years of experience and who doesn't have an extensive track record of, first of all, the first most important thing is preserving the capital of my investors. And the second thing is the returns on that investment. So I look for operators who have a stellar track record of capital preservation, and then secondly, who also have been able to bring very respectable returns to their investors. And so those are the two criteria that I look at before partnering with anyone.
So then who are the folks who are, in terms of, because I've certainly on this podcast, we've come across a lot of different folks who are in the, syndication space and multifamily. What would you say is kind of the area of focus? Is there a particular area, location, types of properties, things that are probably best suited for you and sort of anyone considering investment through you?
Well, just in general, of course, we look at areas that are growth areas in terms of population growth, in terms of employment growth, and in terms of income growth. We then look, of course, at the comparison of the cost of purchasing a home and the cost of rental properties. And if the cost of purchasing a home is considerably less than it is to purchase an apartment, we'd have to look really close at that particular location. But more specifically, that I have been focusing upon have been in the Southeast, in Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina have been the areas in which we have been looking most of the time. There was one investment in Austin, Texas. It was just a remarkably good deal. By and large, we focus here on the Southeast.
Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, and obviously because they're syndications and they're limited partners that people would invest with you, right? So are there opportunities for folks who are also looking to secure properties too, or is this primarily centered around just helping fund, these syndicated
Mhm.
deals?
Well, my focus is definitely on the passive investing side of it. So the opportunities that I'm able to bring are for limited partners. I wouldn't say there's no opportunity. I mean, for those who would like to be active investors, may not be investing with me, but I have a lot of contacts and I could put them in touch with different people whom they might want to partner with in terms on the active side of those as well.
Okay. So in terms of anyone who might want to engage and learn more, like what's the best approach to, because I assume there's a discovery process and something you're just trying to help people identify what what
Okay.
opportunities exist. And so how would folks be best to connect with you?
Well, the best place to go is to my website, steedtalker.com, and that is Steed like the horse and Talker like I am doing now, steedtalker.com, and /webinar. I have a short webinar that goes into really why would you want to invest passively. And well, it is all of those wonderful things that come with real estate, which is enormous tax reduction benefits, hedges against inflation, and also being able to build a legacy for your families, plus just the satisfaction of being invested in a well-run apartment community and being able to see us take a community that is crack house community to a community where children can play safely in the recreation areas even without adult supervision. And so there's personal rewards as well as very tangible financial rewards. And so once again, that is steed.com /webinar.
That's great. So I would highly encourage you to go listen to that, and you can find out more about Alan and his organization and see if it might be interest, especially if, right now actively is not an active investor is not something that you're prepared to get into yet. But that's why, Alan and his groups really can help provide an option, right, to get into the real estate game and learn more about it with tested and sort of experienced operators that can help you provide some passive income and maybe balance out your portfolio of what you have invested. So I really highly encourage you, if you're interested, to go reach out, learn more about Alan and what he's doing, and see if it's a good fit. So Alan, before we kind of close this episode, anything else, any parting shots you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I mean, I'd just like to share in terms of the passive LP investing, it's an educational opportunity as well as a financial opportunity. A lot of people think, well, I don't want to be a passive investor. I want to be a passive investor. Well, becoming an LP doesn't prevent you from becoming an active investor. In fact, it is a good way to prepare and to educate yourself to eventually become an active investor. So it's a good starting point. It's less risk. You're working with seasoned operators, knowledgeable operators, operators with extensive experiences there. That's my closing words there.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story and the ups and downs of just life and real estate investing. It's a journey, right? It's a learning experience all along the way. And that's why I'm so appreciative of folks who are listening. You're taking ownership of your education. You're learning more, and right? And when you're ready, take action, meet folks, reach out to folks like Alan and others to learn more and see if there's something more you want to get into. So I really appreciate your time, Alan, and your words of wisdom. And thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Cranial Pride podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.